Hey, we're back with Azure in the Enterprise. Today I have with me Bahram, the PM for Azure Event Grid. Bahram, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Lyle.
Can you tell us a bit about Azure Event Grid?
Event Grid is basically bringing event-based programming to Azure. So what I mean by that is our goal from a high level is to make events a first-class citizen within Azure. So we want to enable people to be able to take action when something happens in service A, have service B react to that in real time, and basically allow you to orchestrate your app across Azure services. So to give you a little bit of an idea of what we mean by that, we're onboarding Azure publishers, any sort of data store like blob storage, DocDB, SQL database, or anything else that might potentially have something that you might want to react on. So your event hubs, your queues, even management plane events. And then what we're doing is we're basically taking events from there, and we're natively allowing you to take your service and point it at some other endpoint. It could be a webhook, it could be a function, and basically say, hey, when something happens in this, I want you to take action. So you could do this today on your own in pretty hacky methods, but we're basically making it point and click.
Okay. And so what I see here on the slide, you've got a couple little icons over on the right. Mm-hmm. It looks like you're going to have some first-party integration.
Yep.
And then webhooks, which lets you do anything you possibly wanted to with the rest of the world.
Yep. And not just webhooks, we're also, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but we're going to have quite a few different endpoints that you can actually aim to.
Awesome.
As well. So to understand a little bit about how Azure Event Grid really works, there's a couple basic concepts you have to get. The most important thing is events. So events are not really logs or telemetry. They could be, but really what we're aiming for here with events is something that occurred that you want to take action off of. So a file was created, something was deleted, a service was spun up, like a VM, things like that. So events are published by event publishers. So these can be first-party publishers, Azure services in general, or these can be third-party. But the event publisher, at the end of the day, that's just where the event took place. The next concept you need to know about is topics. So the topic is really where the event is sent to by the publisher. So for Event Grid, we will have basically a DNS, domain name, for every single publisher, and they will just send all of their events to that topic. And that's kind of how events enter the Event Grid space.
Okay.
It's not really something you have to worry about if you just want to take your Azure storage account and point it to your Azure function, because we're taking care of that behind the scenes. But if you want to orchestrate your own app on Event Grid, you will have to use topics at some point.
Okay.
So the next thing is event subscriptions. So this is basically how you point your events where you want to go. So event subscriptions allow you to do things like routing and filtering based on where the event is coming from and where you want it to go. They also enable things like reliable delivery. So if your endpoint is down and the event subscription is not able to deliver the event to your endpoint, it will retry in an exponential back-off manner for up to 24 hours so that we can guarantee that you've received your event. And the final thing is event handlers. So this kind of ties it all together. So this is service B that is reacting to your event publisher. So it can be a script that you've written, it can be another Azure service, it could just be some place where you want to store your events for to be able to look back on them. You can do some of these things today, but it's slower, it's more expensive, and you have scale issues. And the reason for that is pretty much any way that this is, for the most part, the way you would accomplish most of these same tasks today is by polling. And when you're polling, you're doing things like long polling or hammer polling. Hammer polling is expensive and it's tough on the service that you're polling. Long polling, you get big latencies, and those latencies get pushed on to your end users, and nobody really likes that. So in order to solve that, we have a push-push architecture, and we've listed out a couple target performance metrics that we're aiming for. So the most important, and the first one is sub-second end-to-end latency. So this basically means no matter how long it's been, if it's been 3 weeks since anything has been put in your storage account, and you want to fire something anytime something goes in that storage account, even if it's the first time in weeks, you'll get your event delivered instantly in less than a second. We're also aiming for high availability so that important tasks can be orchestrated off this. For example, if you have a VM spinning up and you need to take action off that, you don't want to lose that event and not know that your VM came online.
Or you were talking, about ARM itself.
Yeah.
If somebody goes and tries to do a write operation on a network config,
exactly,
be like your VPN circuit back to your network, you may want to know about that pretty
exactly, 100%. We're also building for very high throughput. So we're talking 10 million events per second per region is what we're aiming for. So you can, build a small app that you're just beta testing on our platform, or you could be a Fortune 500 company that is sending critical data through us at very high throughputs. Doesn't really matter. We can scale out horizontally incredibly quickly to be able to handle your throughput. At the same time, we are aiming to have 100 million event subscriptions per region, and that basically means that as specific as you need to make your routing, it's going to be very easy to send using filters exactly what events you need to exactly which endpoints you want. So we're working with all of our publishers, at least our first-class native ones, to have very low publish latency, meaning that when something happens in ARM or something happens in storage, that event gets pushed out immediately. And the final thing is our retry, so that basically gives us reliable delivery of events. Let's dive into a couple scenarios, talk about what you can actually do with Event Grid. So the main 3 areas that we see people really seeing huge benefit here are serverless, DevOps automation, and integration. So I can talk to you a little bit about what those mean. So serverless is basically, it's a new trend in compute that is kind of the abstraction of servers, in that if you want to run some code, but you don't want to deal with, spinning up a VM and maintaining it and everything that goes along with that, we're now providing you environments where you basically just upload your code, hit run, and you're good to go.
So nice examples of those are like Azure Functions, Event Hubs, Service Bus, all these things that were built from the ground up to be highly scalable. Ready.
Exactly. The big thing about serverless, however, is it's event-driven. And if you have, you're just running code on some, without a VM really, how are you going to know when something happens? Well, that's where Event Grid comes in. So we enable scenarios anytime when you need to execute code against a change in your data store. So let's say, really basic scenario, you have an app that, displays profile pictures as part of your app, and every time someone uploads a new picture, you need to go resize that and make a thumbnail of it to put it as your profile picture. Well, if you want to build that in a serverless architecture, the easiest way to do that now is going to be Event Grid to connect your data store, so Azure Blob Storage in this case, to an Azure function. Anytime a photo is uploaded to your blob store, it will fire off an event. Event Grid will route that to the proper Azure function, and that Azure function can go grab that photo, resize it, and post it wherever it needs to be. And this can be done in under a second.
And so in today, there's that kind of integration today, but it's a polling-based mechanism, right?
Yeah, it's a polling-based mechanism, which basically means that if that route has gone cold, if you haven't seen activity there in a number of hours or a number of days, it can take up to 15 minutes for that to spin up, and that's kind of an unacceptable amount of latency.
When we talk about what does this mean for the enterprise, I can also see, and this is one of the examples that you had, B2B integration. You talk about blob storage. Hey, if somebody drops in a PDF, an XML document, something to do with line of business B2B integration things, now as soon as it's dropped in from a partner, you can go push it to a function, push it to the logic apps. You've got a lot more scenarios there.
Yeah, exactly. So the next big area that we see a lot of use for Event Grid is DevOps. So automating DevOps really. And so you asked, DevOps is already an entire field. How does Event Grid help that? The big thing we're doing is we are basically allowing management plane events to be reacted to. And this is something that, for the most part, doesn't really exist currently. So we're working with the Azure Resource Manager team to have events emitted to Event Grid anytime something happens. So this basically means anytime a resource is created or deleted, things like that. So this could be a VM being spun up. This could be a DocDB instance being created. And this basically means that your Azure subscription, your Azure resource group, your AAD tenant, these can all emit events too, which opens up kind of a whole new sandbox of things to do.
Yeah. So to me, it's I think of, hey, if you're already doing some kind of DevOps automation, you're already doing continuous integration, continuous deployment from Visual Studio Team Services. Maybe when somebody goes and spins up like another app service plan, go check if you already have one. I mean, there's all these enterprise scenarios of somebody's going in trying to write on the network. Somebody is going and spinning up a VM.
Yep.
What do we want to do about that?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, some of the scenarios that we've been talking about that are, again, pretty simple scenarios, but things that make everyone's lives a lot easier is, for example, someone spins up a SQL database and it emits an event to Event Grid, and you send that off to an Azure function, and you just have it run a script of compliance checks to make sure that it's using the right security and that it's hooked up to the proper places or not, being read by the wrong sources.
Yeah, did I do encryption on it? They can, as soon as somebody spins that up, have the function go look at it.
Yep.
Did I adhere to my standards? If not, the metadata will tell me who created it. Maybe have the Azure function fire off an email saying, hey, here's our standards. Please just go do this.
Exactly.
But then you're not in their way.
Right.
You actually get the stuff done.
Exactly. And not only that, but it also, these processes that are generally human-driven and are error-prone, you have just a second quick check to say, hey, is everything going right? And you avoid, costly accidents down the road. Another scenario that's exactly along those lines is VM tagging. So let's just say every time I spin up a VM and I'm spinning up hundreds of VMs a day, I just want to simply tag it.
So I could have that fire off to like a third-party IT service management system, or maybe an on-premise one, or as well fire that off to other first-party things that we're collecting and checking to make sure that people are taking action on. And
yeah, exactly. And that leverages one of the features that Event Grid has baked right into it, which is event type matching and filtering. So if you create, for example, you want to do multiple things when a VM is created, you just create multiple event subscriptions looking for that event. That publisher, in this case, Azure Resource Manager, only has to send that event to us once, and then we look at it and send a copy of that event to every destination that requires that event to process off of it. So it can be sent to Azure Automation and your store and any other endpoints.
I can imagine security guys would love this because they can say, hey, I want to go on my corporate Azure subscription footprint. These are sensitive things that people might spin up, and I'd like to know when they happen.
Yeah, 100%. And so our third scenario is integration. So the question is really, can third parties leverage the power of Event Grid and send to Azure native Azure locations just as Azure Blob Storage or any other publisher? And what we've built in order to enable that is application topics. So this is that concept that I referred to earlier on that you do need to know if you want to send your own custom events to Event Grid. So what you do is you just create an application topic. We give you a DNS and a SaaS key. And now you have a secure way of sending events, however you choose to define them, to Event Grid. And now anyone with access to this application topic, which you define the access to that application topic, can create event subscriptions against that application topic just as though it was a native Azure publisher. And so now you can use our reliable delivery, you can use our routing, you can use our filtering, and you can send those same events to your Azure function, or you can, route them completely outside of Azure as well to webhook endpoints wherever they need to be.
So I could see, like, for example, Docker repositories or other things like that. When somebody uploads an image, they could fire off a webhook that would come back into Azure Event Grid. And then based off of that, you could fire off a function that would go pull an image and go deploy in Azure.
Yep. Yeah, and to extend off that, there's a couple other scenarios that people are pretty excited about. One is the way that Event Grid extends Logic Apps. So Logic Apps currently is seen as Azure's go-to way of integrating outward to other applications, third-party to Microsoft. Well, now that Logic Apps is a consumer of Event Grid events, anything that can send events to Event Grid can now connect to Logic Apps. And so, boom, your world has gotten even bigger with the Logic Apps scenario. Another place is, your custom apps. So, I build my own social network for dogs, and, I want to leverage Event Grid and the rest of the Azure ecosystem. Well, now I create an application topic, and every time something occurs in my social network for dogs, I send an event to my application topic, and I create event subscriptions off that. Sometimes I send those events to, storage, sometimes to Azure Functions, or to, my own custom front ends.
I can see this in like a lot of B2B integration scenarios where instead of having to figure out, network routes and how do we set up VPNs between us and another partner and do all this crazy stuff, maybe instead when that partner does something on their side, they could fire off an event into Azure Event Grid. You could have a function that's looking at that and say, hey, my partner did something. Let's go grab that piece of information from them. Maybe it's in Azure, maybe it's somewhere else.
Yep.
That's a nice way to do integration without having to go set up, your classic, we're doing integration, so that means we've got to have secure virtual networks between us and all these other crazy things.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, now we can hop into a demo really quickly.
Cool.
So to give you a little idea of what it looks like when we're actually using Event Grid in the wild, let's do a little demo. So there's a whole host of exciting, complicated things we can pull off with Event Grid. But today, let's just listen for role assignment changes on one of our Azure subscriptions. So what I want to do is I just want to send myself an email when someone is added or deleted from one of my Azure subscriptions, just so I can keep track of that for security purposes. So we have a brand new blank logic app here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use it as our event handler when an event is emitted from our Azure subscription and routed through Event Grid, letting us know that someone has been added or deleted from our Azure subscription. So the first one we want to do is connect our logic app to Event Grid by creating a new Event Grid subscription. So this event subscription has to live somewhere. We're just going to put it in one of our Azure subscriptions. And we have to decide what type of resource we want to listen to. So today, because we're looking for role assignment changes in one of our Azure subscriptions, we're going to listen to those subscriptions themselves. And we're going to pick the specific Azure subscription we want to listen to. Now, because we only want to look for role assignment changes and not all deletes, adds, and changes within the subscription, we're actually going to put a little advanced filter on here. So we're actually going to cheat really quickly and look at our topic within this connector. And this is, I'm just going to grab our subscription from here. So what we want to do is we actually want to create a little filter on this subscription that is only looking for certain providers and role assignments. So what I've done here is I've created a little filter on this event subscription, And what it's going to do is it's only going to pass along events to this logic app that meet this, that come from this certain scope. So I want to look for events that happen within this subscription on my provider Microsoft authorization and changes in the role assignment. So now I want to take action based on this. We decided we're going to send ourselves an email, so I'm going to choose my preferred email sender. And I'm just going to send myself an email. And I'm just going to let myself know that a role assignment has been changed in my subscription. We can actually also pull data from our event payload itself. So I'm just going to choose the full subject. Hit save. And now we've created a event subscription that is listening to events on our Azure subscription. And every time an event comes through that matches our role assignments filter, it's going to pass those on to our logic app, and our logic app is just going to send us an email letting us know the scope of the role change. So I'm going to hit run, and now let's go test this guy out. I'm going to go to my Azure subscriptions, go to the one that we're listening to, and I'm going to go to my access control and actually add myself as a contributor on this Azure subscription. Hit save and wait for myself to be added to this Azure subscription. So let's just refresh this and make sure that I actually exist here. As you can see, I'm now a contributor user to this Azure subscription. And if I fetch my emails, you can see that I have now received an email saying that a role assignment has changed in my subscription. You can see the subscription, the role assignment, and ID for that change.
So the question I'm sure everyone is wondering is, which Azure services are going to be available for publishing and for subscribing. So the end goal actually is eventually all Azure services will be available as publishers and subscribers, so far as it makes sense. And in that way, Azure Event Grid will be kind of the eventing glue that holds all the services together. For the short-term roadmap, however, during launch, we have Event Hubs, Azure Blob Storage, Azure Resource Manager, and your custom application topics available as publishers. And then we have a whole host of Azure services you can see over on the right coming soon. From the subscriber end, functions, automation, logic apps, and webhooks will be available immediately when we launch, and a bunch of other Azure services will be coming soon. Because we have webhooks, actually, any endpoint that you prop up is available immediately.
That's pretty cool. I think as people watch this and they start to sink in, hey, now I can do programming on any event in the Azure platform, publishing, subscribing, acting on first party, third party, integrate with other SaaS providers. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, we're pretty excited where this is going to go.
Looking forward to seeing this out. Looking forward to you guys getting some feedback on it, and then I think we'll come back to you guys in a few months and see how things are going and see everything else that we can show for demos.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks all.
Bahram, thanks, and we'll see you in the next Azure in the Enterprise.
Sounds great.